They say there are two things most certain in life: death and taxes. And today we're talking not about death, but taxes. Yes, taxes are incredibly important. And today, not as we talk about not so much in tax, we're more talking actually a blog from Tax Research UK. So before you all yawn with boredom, this actually has nothing to do with tax. This actually has to do with the furlough scheme, as you know, that's currently in place in the UK, and the fact that coming out of furlough, because the government doesn't seem like it's going to extend furlough beyond October, this could cause a massive meltdown of the entire UK within months. We've said before on this channel that you have businesses that even if the furlough scheme ended, they could not in any way, shape or form bring back all their staff or anything like that. There are a lot of very vulnerable industries in the UK that as soon as that furlough disappears and they are officially, back to business, they have no business to do. Their supply lines are going to be incredibly disruptive. The potential of having customers, who knows? Not only that, end of October, we could be just on the brink of a second wave. So you have all this coming together to create a absolute masterpiece of cacophony, and well, that just sums up where Britain really is today, in one just seemingly rolling catastrophe. So anyway, on to the blog. So as I said, it comes from taxresearch.co.uk or .org.uk, shall we say, and the article is called "From Furlough to Meltdown is a Matter of Months." I was in discussion with an old friend yesterday on what might happen over the coming months and even years. Like me, they're deeply troubled by the current lack of any clarity, vision or leadership from the government. This blog summarises my thinking. It was meant to be a Twitter thread, but it got too long for that. This, however, has dictated the style. We agreed that the government has been hoping for two things. The first was a short, rather sharp hit from coronavirus, after which there would be herd immunity. They had the same hope for the economy: a short, sharp hit, then a full recovery, and neither is going to happen. Whether we get a second coronavirus wave is unknown, but there is a risk of it as a fact, so we have to stay in a sort of a semi-lockdown. And COVID-19 is an epidemic now. Even a vaccine is unlikely to erase it. So everything will be different. There's a long-term social medical impact of this as well. On the economy, the bad news has hardly begun. The government is now passing the buck to businesses. Vast numbers of them remain vulnerable. Few can now operate at the scale that they did, but high overheads remain, and many tax bills are only deferred, and failure rates will be high. While high failure rates and even the fear of it will come substantial redundancies. I think we're already at 2 million plus unemployed. Add 1 in 3 of those furloughed or on self-employed support, and you could very easily be a 6 million unemployed. That could be a potential fact we're looking at. This is how bad it could be. 6 million unemployed. That is an absolute staggering number for this, and God knows how the Tories are going to try and do it, given for the fact of how supportive they are for people being on unemployed. So sudden unemployment at anything like this scale will become a crisis in months. At most, the middle classes are about to learn about the Tory approach to benefits and the reality of universal credit. People will face and I completely agree with them there. There are a lot of people over the years that have said, because they've been in the middle class and haven't been unemployed for a long period of time, or were never near that level to need it. But all of a sudden, they might start needing that universal credit, and they're going to actually have to interact with the system. And all of a sudden, all these things you might hear about how bad universal credit has been for years are going to become an absolute thunderstorm. So people will face a crisis whether they can feed their children. Some already can't in the UK, but this is going to become widespread. And other bills, from the mortgage to the credit card, and then the utilities will all go unpaid. From furlough to financial meltdown is a matter of months. The government has already said it is not interested in helping. It will not swap debt for equality, debt for equity in small businesses, it says, condemning many businesses to extinction. And it claims that the furlough is bad for people's morale. How unemployment without hope is better is anyone's guess. The critical point is that unless there is very rapid change, or a change of attitude, which requires a complete change in the Tory and widespread fear of government debt, then the intervention to prevent this disaster will not happen in time. And once the jobs have gone, that's it. Other consequences will follow quickly. A massive increase in child poverty is my big concern, and it is unavoidable right now. General physical and mental ill health will follow, but the spiraling impact also worries me. Unpaid debts are going to cause major banking and then a housing crisis in 2021. Unpaid rents are going to lead to many evictions of tenants as unemployment rises. Landlords hate those on benefits, and mortgage failures are going to lead to even more evictions as a result of repossessions, and then to forced housing sales. That will result in the property price fall. Property price fall leads to a banking crisis in the UK, although by no means anywhere else. The UK banking sector is really just a property financing scheme. It is wholly dependent on rising prices to ensure its own survival, and I'm not convinced banks have anything like the capital required to get through 2021. And at that point of meltdown, at that level, we still can't imagine its possibility. Effectively, the ability of the financial system to pay will disappear without intervention. On top of all this, there is Brexit. I needn't add any more on that issue, except to note this timing couldn't be literally worse. I don't see these outcomes as possible right now. I see them as likelihoods. In fact, without intervention from the government, I see them as near certainties. The government is banking on us being back to normal by Christmas, even when the Office for Budget Responsibility says there will be about 3.5 million unemployed. And I think that's wildly optimistic, but that would be in itself enough to trigger much of what I'm suggesting. So what can be done? There has to be alternatives, and there still are. The first essential step is to accept the reality that millions of jobs are at risk. The government has got nowhere near close to accepting that as yet. The second is essential, is to accept that businesses can do nothing to prevent this risk by itself. There is no possibility of a market-based solution to the coming problem of mass unemployment. This requires a change to 40 years of thinking that markets hold the solution to all the problems governments face. The third essential is to make job prevention a priority. So loans to businesses have to be turned into capital, with serious conditions on future corporate behaviour, tax payment, allowance disclosure, pay policy, and governance attached. There must be a price for support. The fourth essential is support for businesses' overhead cost reduction. State-imposed rent reductions should be required. 20% is the minimum. For some types of businesses, property It may be needed to be more. Landlords have to take the next big hit in this crisis. Fifth, bank loan repayment holidays must be granted for up to 2 years, with loans being automatically extended thereafter, and with interest being rolled up, but with a ceiling on the rate due. There must be no penalties for this. Sixth, unpaid taxes must become further equity loans for businesses unable to pay them. The price must be worker retention on the board, with statutory liability protection for those nominated. Worker directors must be the enforcers of the government bailout conditions. And seventh, Brexit must be postponed. There is not a business in the country that can withstand the pressure, the cost and chaos it will impose now. I'm not saying that it should be cancelled. I know there was a referendum, but the negotiating period has to be extended. And what after that? Furlough has to remain for vulnerable sectors, and there are many of them. For those already made redundant, universal credit and child benefit have to increase significantly. Then steps have to be taken to keep people in their homes. Rent holidays must be a statutory right. Landlords must be able to claim matching mortgage payment holidays, and banks must not be able to foreclose. A shared equity arrangement must be offered instead. Because of the risk of falling house prices, negative equity traps must also be avoided. It should be made illegal for any mortgage payment on the scale to ever exceed the sale value of a property. Banking accounting rules must changed to keep property loans on these arrangements on the balance sheet. But all this only plugs gaps. The action to rebuild is required. And yes, of course, there is the Green New Deal. But that's because there is simply no other plan. And nothing else means nothing that long-term needs for our society as it does. So we need to start as soon as possible. Repair roads to make them safer for cyclists. Build a safer cycle parking. Explore how to turn redundant engineering skills into bike manufacturing capacity. Start insulation programs as quickly as possible and encourage double and triple glazing where it does not exist. New sustainable social housing. Plan local transport transformation using electric to low carbon vehicles. Put a hold on the HS2 and major road rebuilding. Redeploy the resources to create a local improvements that might transform communities. Abandon Hinkley Point. Build renewables instead, from rooftop panels to better wind. And finally, really harnessing today's power possibilities. Create the businesses to support all of this, including heat pump, solar panel and wind power equipment that we need. Invest in water, that is, improving GOT delivery systems, as well as flood defence to make sure it does not go where it is not wanted. Dam the Wash to preserve large tracts of eastern England. Build tidal lagoons to deliver power. And reform agriculture to reduce our dependency on imports and chemicals. Both are entirely possible. All that is required is pump priming and some vision plus some cash. And don't presume that everything is about building. It isn't. Invest in care as well, of all sorts, and deliver flexible education for a new world of entirely different work that our children, as well as a lifetime of learning that we need, are going to need. And then, only then, might we have the economy we need. So how to pay for this? A number of thoughts follow. First, imagine the cost of the alternative. It's far bigger. Paying for all this is going to be cheaper than allowing economic meltdown with decades of long recovery at best. I'm laying out on the cheaper option here. Secondly, there is no shortage of money in the UK. We can have as much of it as we want at the touch of the Bank of England computer keyboard. The supply of money is limitless. Third, unless we go for disaster aversion and then employment creation now, the impact of the resulting financial meltdown will be much larger in the UK than most other countries, and it will be much worse for the value of the pound than money creation might ever be. Fourth, there is no market for debt, don't worry. Japan suggests we could do more than 2 trillion of quantitative easing right now without inflation risk rising. Fifth, forget tax rises. Face a crisis like this. It should be on the agenda for a long time. Any tax reforms should be solely about making society fairer, e.g., by taxing wealth inequality with no net increases. Sixth, savings, and especially tax incentive ISAs and pensions must be put to work to support this programme. Unless they are invested in new sustainable jobs, the tax reliefs must go. Seventh, the Bank of England scraps its independence. This is not the time for the City of London to be dictating terms. The reason for this fiasco has long gone. Eighth, watch the rest of the world. Everyone will end up doing programs like this. Will only be financially punished if we don't. And how long is this going to happen politically? Johnson's power is already slipping away. The Grayling fiasco proves that. Soon, Johnson's control of his own party will end. No MP wants to realise just how much their own career hangs by the thread of Johnson's unholy, unpredictable whim. The Tory party has an instinct for power, but it has a problem. There is no heir apparent, and don't say Shinak. Chancellors who deliver many millions to unemployment do not go on to take the top job. So, if they realise Johnson is beyond hope, who could they choose? Given Grove is also tainted by this. I cannot see anyone who would appease the anger there will be in the country. And anger there will be, because it will be very apparent that there is unemployment, it will be by government choice. After all, the government locked down, the government furloughed, and then the government will have left the people unemployed. They will be the only people to blame. That blame will be very real, very pointed, and very direct as the crisis grows. I'll be candid and say I cannot see how a mass protest can be avoided, and if that happens, I can only hope that it is not violent, because I would hate to see that happen. But people living in fear have nothing left to lose. Can a government that has chosen mass unemployment and made it worse by its own choices survive? I doubt it. Whether the electoral system, I cannot see that happening, unless, of course, democracy is suspended. I can think that will make things worse, not better, which I don't mean it won't be tried. In which case, I sincerely hope there are others, preferably in a coalition, because that is what this demands. Who might be prepared to take over and deliver the government we need now? There is no sign of that as yet, and that also worries me. There is also no real sign of deep concern at the consequences of the unemployment to come, as yet anywhere much in the political spectrum. This, as is most, is almost going to be one no one can believe it's going to get this bad. But it is, and we're heading for an economic breakdown of a type we have never seen before. It is going to be of the sort that can only and forever change the society we live in, and no one wants to seem to recognise that fact, and that fact that it's going to happen. Politics is still playing around the edges of issues, talking about school reopenings and arguing over the definitions of a COVID death while we're heading for a collapse. And the route that collapse is very short. It begins next month as furlough begins to wind down. The mass redundancies will begin to be announced in September when the end of furlough is imminent. And then the corporate failures will begin rising. The road from furlough to financial failure is a very short one. We're on it, and no one is saying stop, let alone do a U-turn. We don't need to fail. We will because we have a government that does not think that it can stop what is going to happen, and that's because it believes that it cannot create the money needed to tackle the massive problems that we are going to face. The government is wrong. It can avert this crisis. It can save millions of jobs. It can prevent child poverty. It can save the blighted hope and the health of vast numbers of people. It could direct the economy out of this crisis, but it won't, because it thinks balancing the books is more important than caring about people. And the price we're going to pay for it is going to be staggering. I just have one hope, and that is I might be wrong. But I wouldn't be putting this in writing if I thought I was. And that, ladies and gentlemen, makes for very, very sobering reading. It's worrying. It really is. And that's the state we've got in, and that's the state we've got in because of the idiots that are in charge. There's no other way you can clearly put it. The fault of this entire disaster lies at the fault and at the feet of the Tory party and no one else, because they do not want to seem, as always, the Tory party is short-sighted. They only think about quick and easy short-term wins, hence the furlough scheme. The furlough scheme was just a short-term option. Easy peasy. However, no one in the government seems to be thinking long-term. Hence, why we have seen no post-Brexit planning. And people might say, oh, but Johnson said this and this. Those programmes will only last a year, as will the money. There's nothing beyond almost 2022. But there you have it, and that's the awful, terrible, impending doom that's about to befall this country. And as I said there, I hope this guy is wrong, because he does paint a very bleak picture, but I can't argue with the reasoning behind what he's put there. I really can't.